Yes.
I had no idea that so many people would show up for this. It's very exciting.
No one has
So I wanted to tell you a little bit about my plans for my sabbatical, but also just kind of talk about sabbaticals in general and why they might be a good idea for the person who's leaving, but also for the organization that's sending them. Along with a little bit of history. I haven't put in, I didn't like put my travel itinerary in here because I don't find out if I get this grant until September. I had to turn it in March, and now I'm like twiddling my thumbs all summer long. The grant is from the Lilly Foundation, and they get tons. And my guess is they have some committee that's just going to be working on all these for a long time. So you can pray that I can have patience until September. But let's talk about this. The part I'm most excited about is the stuff that you are going to be invited to do as part of this. So let's begin. What is a sabbatical anyway? A sabbatical has the same Hebrew root as Sabbath, of course, meaning rest. A sabbatical is a rest or break from work, an extended period of time intentionally spent on something that's not your routine job or your kind of daily routine. You're kind of taken out of that. And actually, the concept of the sabbatical is based on the biblical practice of Shemitah, we're going to call that right, which is related to agriculture, and it's also related to creation. So if you know somebody, or if you're somebody who gets the benefit of a sabbatical, typically you're allowed to take one every 7 years. Why 7? The Sabbath, because God rested on the seventh day, but also because, according to Leviticus 25, you had to leave your land fallow every 7 years, which is a religious practice, right? So even the land gets a rest, a Sabbath, but it's also just good farming, right? Because if you put crops in the same soil year after year after year, the nutrients in the, am I echoing? Mm-hmm. The nutrients get depleted.
Maybe because you're holding back.
It's because of this.
Maybe.
And you need to let the land kind of replenish those minerals and nutrients that make the land really fertile. So it's a practical thing, and it's also a religious thing. Hi, come in. Oh my.
I don't know
Okay.
how to fix it.
When did sabbaticals start? As far as my research took me, they started at Harvard. And because the university really wanted to attract top people in their field. And they wanted to be the place where people were coming up with new ideas, where there was a lot of innovation and discovery. And they decided the best way to make that happen was to let these learned people do that. Like take a break from their teaching load.
Is that better?
No.
Is that better? Okay. Take a break from their teaching load and write or work or travel or do the things that they needed to do to become a top person in their field. And what they discovered even all those years ago was that this policy attracted new recruits. It was attractive to people thinking about coming to Harvard to teach, to think that they would get this opportunity. And it advanced research and study across all departments. Have you or someone you know ever taken a sabbatical?
Sure.
Pastor Erickson took one. Anybody else?
Chris took one.
Pastor Chris, Myron? David, did you take one? So all the pastors in the room got one. That's great. Anybody else? Yes.
I didn't get one, but our son-in-law has had several, I think.
Can you tell us more about what does he do?
He is
An engineer for Adobe.
Yeah.
he
An
works
engineer for Adobe.
for Adobe, and he's been there for 20-some years.
Like a computer
Yeah.
engineer?
Yeah, and a computer nerd.
Computer nerds
We
get
can't-
sabbaticals
We can't
too.
talk to him.
You can't talk to him. I knew it was going to be hard when I asked you, what does he do? And you looked at Karen and said, yes.
Pastor Erickson started the Saints group.
Oh, okay. So while Pastor Erickson, or after he came back from his sabbatical, he
Right.
started the Saints group. Look at that. So there was a ministry that developed out of his sabbatical. I have people in my family who have taken sabbaticals. My sister Sarah is what does she do again? She's an ethnomusicologist.
Really?
So she studies the intersection of culture and music. And she teaches in the music department at the University of South Carolina in Columbia, and mostly teaches music history to her students. But she was granted a sabbatical from the National Endowment of the Arts and went to London and could afford to fly there and stay there for several months in a little apartment by the British Library. So she could go to the British Library and study with the primary sources of the things that she was studying, right? So she got to see music from the 17th century, like the original piece of paper with the original composer's ink on there, and study from that. And there were notes in the margins or other things that don't show up when you're just looking at it on a piece of sheet music or in a book. And she got to know the archivists there really well. And Jane Austen's writing desk is in the British Library. So she would pass that every day and pray to her personal saint. And she also later took the sabbatical to London was to help her do research for a class that she wanted to design. She also took a sabbatical later to turn her thesis, like her dissertation, into a book that could be more generally readable by people who aren't ethnomusicologists. So kind of like a book that you could sell to students or even like sell on Amazon instead of her dissertation, which I fell asleep trying to read after like 3 pages. There are also people, it's not just people in kind of the arts who take sabbaticals, but researchers, people who work in the sciences will take sabbaticals and maybe travel to a specific lab, right? There's the, help me out here. There's a lab in Switzerland that, you know what I'm talking about, right?
CERN?
Is that what it is?
Super Collider?
The Super Collider.
Yeah, that's right.
There's like 1 or 2 of those in the world, right? So if you're interested in that, you have to go to Switzerland to like be there and study that. Or you go to a specific lab where they have specific equipment that your university or organization doesn't have. Recently, hospitals have been granting sabbaticals more often, especially in departments that are pretty stressful, like if you're an emergency room doctor, you know. And they do that to prevent burnout because they want to retain the good staff that they have. They don't want these people to burn out and then have to get new people to come in. What do you think some pros and cons of sabbaticals might be for the person taking one and for the university or organization or employer that is granting one? Yeah, Karen,
You gotta get somebody to cover you when you're gone.
you gotta get somebody to cover you, right? Because they're not just gonna like send you on vacation and hope for the best.
Yeah,
Yeah.
someone to do your work.
Someone to do your work.
Yeah.
What else?
You might get some new ideas for ways to handle what it is your daily routine is that will keep you fresh, but also will give new ideas to the people that are with you that they take with them to begin with their lives.
Right, so if you're rested and refreshed and get a chance to think about your regular ministry, like maybe Pastor Erickson, who came back and had the energy and vision to start a new ministry, right? Also, is it fun to work with people who are burned out? Do they make good colleagues? Like, not necessarily, right? Organizations do this, and more are doing it, and they don't just do it because it's good for the person who's going. It's good for the organization as well, otherwise they wouldn't provide that benefit, right? Yeah, Julie.
I could see where it could lead to maybe an unexpected result. That in the process of that time away and in the course of that study, the person could be redirected to a different line of work, different challenge.
They don't come back.
They don't come back. There's a challenge, right? There's a con, right? That somebody might go away and have this epiphany that's like, hey, being away from my job every day is pretty great, right? Or I don't actually enjoy doing this thing, which is a con for the organization, right? But also, maybe you don't want people working for you that aren't very passionate or committed to what they're doing, you know? Any other pros or cons you can imagine, Chuck?
I would think a con would be like, for you or somebody, you gotta come up with an idea, a legitimate idea of what to do, and I don't know whether it has to be approved by council or anybody, but you gotta show that you're doing something that, you're not just going on vacation.
Right. There's a process,
Yeah.
right? And this was a very detailed grant application that I had to read like 50 times because there are so many directions. So it's a process, and you have to talk to people and work that out. Okay. This is the cover for the 2024 Lilly Endowment National Clergy Renewal Program. So Lilly provides sabbaticals and all kinds of support for clergy people. And this is just a particular grant for clergy sabbaticals because they understand that congregations might not have the funds to grant these, and they want to help congregations out. So this is a pretty enticing cover, isn't it? And a really good question. You can't tell, but this is a lovely ocean and there's like a beach at the top. So, what would make your heart sing as that question posed on the previous slide? If you had about 12 weeks and you still received your salary and benefits, if you're a working person, and you had more than a year to plan, and money was no object, or a reasonable amount of money was no object, and you could do something different than what you're trained to do or professionally qualified to do, what would you do? It's kind of like the what would you do if you won the lottery kind of question. So talk to somebody next to you about the first thing that comes to mind about what you would do given these parameters.
I don't have to hear what
Yeah, that's cool. I want to do something in I don't know beyond that. So it's been a long time. Yeah, I feel like
Are you selling shares? Take the nickel when you can.
I should have been more clear. This isn't what you think I should do. It's what you would do. If you had this opportunity, what would you do? Okay, give me some of your ideas. Well, first of all, how did it feel to just kind of like imagine what that could be? How did it feel?
Exciting. Good. Exciting.
Exciting? Anything else?
Abstract.
Abstract. yeah. What were some of your ideas? What would you do? What would you do at?
Can you guess?
Go to Wrigley Field, go around and go to baseball games at all the major parks in America.
You're right.
And you could get you could afford to get a jersey at each one, and like buy all the snacks in the stadium. Oh, that's good. Would you get an RV and like drive around in it? Or would you fly?
Now you tell me. I should have done this 50 years ago.
What are some of your other ideas? Jan, what would you do?
Well, I studied 2 summers in New York City.
Okay.
And be able to, but I was young, in my
Yes.
early 20s. I would like to go back now and do everything again with experienced eyes.
Okay.
Go
So
to the-
kind of relive something that you did when you were young to see maybe how it's different now.
Well, and just from a different perspective. Go to St.
Yeah.
John the Divine. Go to
Yeah.
all the different churches I went to
Yeah.
and the museums I went to. How I would see it differently.
Yes. Very interesting, a different perspective. What would you do in that?
I would go live in Stockholm.
Live in Stockholm. Okay, and just live there
Yeah, and explore.
and
It's
explore.
a wonderful city. I've been there. And I would refresh my Swedish on that. I can't do it now, but.
Strengthen your
10
Swedish.
years ago I would have.
Swedish skills,
Yeah.
kind of freshen up on a language. What would you do, Jeff?
Ride my bike cross country,
Ride your bike cross country.
but I'd have to come a good reason why to do it.
No.
But I had 12 weeks to do it, so I could do that.
Would you take all your gear on your bike, or would somebody be driving alongside
No,
you?
I'd have somebody come behind me.
Yeah. Like a
I just
first
wanna ride, I
aid
wanna
kit
drag all
and
my
your
stuff.
trapped and all that stuff.
Not me.
What would you do?
If I were still being a principal or a teacher, I would go back to get some training on how to work with families, because the family structure in the past years has just changed dramatically. The kids that are coming along have so many special needs that are not either being provided by the families or they're misinterpreted somehow. I would want more training on how to work with the families that I'm dealing with.
Did you hear that? Yeah. So where's a place where they're doing that kind of study?
That, I would have to research that to find
Yeah,
out, you know.
but maybe there's an institution that has like a psychology department that
Yes.
talks about that.
Yeah.
And then you could go there and live there and get some new training. Anybody else want to share their exciting idea? Karen?
I would follow tap dance groups around the world.
knew it.
I know of one in France, I know of one in Australia, sorry, and one in Spain.
You'd follow tap dancing groups?
Yeah, I've
Like-
been tap dancing
Like
since I was-
clogging?
No, no, tap
Like,
dancing.
no, you know, like Irish dancers or like,
No,
no, just straight up tap.
Tap dancing.
And you'd follow them.
Yeah, I just
You'd
go
be a
around the world.
groupie on the road. Roadie.
Well, and then hopefully learn from those people too.
And take lessons. That'd be great. Jill, did you have your hand up?
I didn't, but.
Oh, Don.
I was going to fossil dig.
Say that again.
Fossil dig.
A fossil dig,
That'd be fun.
right? To like Montana or
Yes.
China or where?
Anywhere.
Anywhere. And be like help out on an actual archaeological or
Not archaeological, paleontology.
paleontological
Yeah.
dig. That sounds good. That sounds great. So, really good ideas, right? And all these things would qualify you for a Lilly grant from for clergy renewal, because this grant, unlike an academic grant, like what Don you described, is kind of more like an academic sabbatical.
Yeah.
You have to kind of have a product, like a book, or some lab results, or some extra training at the end of it. Okay. These are some of the parameters around the Lilly Foundation's sabbatical grant. They really want you to rest. So part of your proposal has to include downtime, like when you're not traveling or researching or studying, but actually resting. They will not grant a sabbatical to anyone proposing less than 12 weeks of leave. They found that that's a good number to actually feel like you're away, but not be away so long that it's hard to come back. And I find that when I go on vacation, I like to go on vacation for like 2 weeks, because I spend the first couple days of the first week like decompressing from my regular life, right? Like it takes my body a long like the shoulders a long time to come down to here. And then a couple days before I go back, that all starts to come back again when I think about, oh man, how many emails am I gonna have? Or, I'm gonna have a bunch of work to do when I get back, right? Because it's work to leave and it's work to come back. No product is required at the end of this type of sabbatical, unlike most academic sabbaticals. Because you can receive a grant outside your area of expertise or study. You could go on a fossil dig even if you've never been on a fossil dig. Your family is invited and their expenses are covered as well. So it's not just for you, like when my sister went and she was a single person and took off to London for several months. Like now she'd get to take her husband and her daughter and be there together. But here's the part that makes it for clergy renewal and not just clergy vacation. Your grant is not just for you, but for the congregation. So the total amount of money that they would grant is $60,000. But you can write the grant included in that $60,000, $20,000 of it you could write for renewal in the congregation. The proposal must involve and benefit your faith community. And this includes money to pay for any needed coverage in my absence. So like Karen, you were saying, one of the cons of a sabbatical is somebody's got to do your work while you're gone. So this would pay for that extra person to come in and do that work. So I titled my grant proposal, I Love to Tell the Story. Do you know that hymn? Yes. And these are some of the reasons I wanted to do this. And it might seem like my own personal genealogical history doesn't have anything to do with ministry, but wait. I will share that with you. So when I was a kid, one of my favorite things to do when I visited my grandma was to go through her cardboard box of old black and white photos and to ask who those people were and to hear the stories about them. When I was in high school and a senior, I did a project where I sent letters to all of my living relatives and asked them, gave them like prompts to get them to think about their early life, and they wrote me letters back because I realized I didn't just want to look at the old black and white photos, I wanted to know the stories of the people behind them. So now I have this like collection, you know, in my grandmother's handwritten, beautiful penmanship of some of the questions that I asked her. The first day I was in college, I took a class and the first words out of the professor's mouth were, the Bible is holy because it's a book filled with stories. And if your story isn't sacred to you, there's something wrong with you. So this kind of theme of story has kind of been winding its way through my life for a long time. And this, when I got to think about what would make my heart sing, this is what came to me. And so far in the process, I've discovered this young woman whose name is Margaret Amanda Ralston, who was born in 1774 in Ireland, but then moved to Scotland because of religious persecution. And she's one of my ancestors. And her grave is somewhere in Scotland, and I kind of want to go see it. Oh, there it is. So what I dream about doing is tracing my own story back through the generations, but then also experience the places where those people lived and died, and learn how maybe I have been shaped by the people who came before me. Were they people of faith? Were they resilient? Did they make big sacrifices in their life? Did they demonstrate courage, right? Did they live in the same little village their whole life long? I'm just really curious about that, and curious how maybe some of those things maybe show themselves down through the generations. And then I want to share that with my family and especially my kids, and show them where they come from and what kind of people they belong to. And it would be nice to be able to step out of my daily routine without risking financial ruin, right? And to rest and reflect for more than like a week at a time. Like I said, because it takes about that long for me to actually relax. Here's some other reasons I decided on this path. You all have gifted me with your stories for 7 years. That's how long I've been here. And I want to give that gift back to all of you. Your stories have shaped me and changed me and strengthened my faith. So how great would it be if you shared them with each other? I shouldn't be the only one receiving that beautiful gift. I feel kind of selfish about it. Knowing your own story and then passing it along is how faith is passed on, right? It's difficult to share our faith if we can't tell the story of our faith. Now, some of you might have people in your own family who never spoke a word to you about their personal faith, but you saw them live it out every day, right? You saw them go to church, you saw them read the Bible every morning, you saw them write the check for their tithe, you saw them feed the poor. That's a story that has shaped you. And if you don't tell that story, either by your actions or with your own words, it doesn't get passed on. We grow in compassion and empathy for others when we know their stories. Stories shape our identity as humans and Christians because, again, the Bible is holy because it's a book of stories. What stories we tell and why we tell them is a very powerful thing, both for the person telling and for the person listening. Is there anybody in your life who tells the same story and you've heard it like 50 times?
Yeah.
Right? So unless that person has dementia, they're telling you that story because it's a powerful story in their life for one reason or another. And if it's a story of victimization, or if it's a story of grief, or if it's a story of, getting fired from a job, and you tell that story 50 times to everybody that you know, think about what that does to your sense of who you are or what you're able to do, right? If all you do is tell people how you were fired from your job, do you think that you'd have a very good sense of self-esteem? Probably not, right? So talk to somebody near you about a time when knowing someone's story has had an impact on your life, positive or negative, somebody in your family or somebody you just met once passing by.
I guess I looked to my ears and just in particular. I think sometimes there's this big story where that explains right? Whether it explains who they are and some of them maybe you can change or who they are. Right, jaw drops, you know, like, way back. And when we know each other really well. But it was like a shocker. They had been, again, I think that so for I don't think she sees that. I think she's really back myself.
Okay, who's got a good story to tell?
And I can see why.
Who's got a good story to tell about a time when knowing somebody's story made a big impact on you? Anybody? You were all talking, very animated. Ruth, tell us.
I was just telling my table that I went to a funeral 2 weeks ago, and it was of someone I had worked with, and he passed away real suddenly. And I knew him superficially, but every time he'd show up at a social event, he would bring a really young, beautiful woman with him. And I made the call that he had a trophy wife.
Yeah.
And I still interacted with him. We were still, good friends. I go to his funeral, and his family gets up and says he's the primary caregiver for his very disabled wife for, I don't know, the last 40, 50 years. And everyone's and the only reason they said that was because they're very worried about who's going to take care of her now. And I realized I had a really superficial, judgy view of him, and I didn't really know the man at all. And if I would have known that, we probably would have had a much deeper relationship.
Yeah. So you made the call that he liked younger women and wanted to have a beautiful person on his arm. And instead there was something much deeper going on in his life. Yeah. I probably would have made that judgment too. Yeah, you're not alone. Don't worry. Yeah. Anybody else? Do you have a good story? Who's been on a mission trip and heard a story from someone in El Salvador or Tanzania where you just kind of realized what somebody's daily life is like in that part of the world? Has that ever happened to somebody? Yeah. Or have any of you ever worked with Connor? He does work with people who have been released from prison. And I make all kinds of assumptions about people who have spent years in prison. And to hear their stories, it's really amazing. Certainly compassion and empathy grows when I hear their stories. Chuck.
Well, several of us in this room, Carl and Don, we go to the Bible study, Community Warehouse Bible study on Friday mornings, and usually half the people, all men, or mostly all men, have been in prison. The one guy's been in prison was in prison for 37 years, and these guys tell stories. Just this Friday, I was fighting back tears because we were telling, they live a whole different life than I've ever experienced, and yet they're passionate Christians. I mean, it's hard to comprehend.
Yeah, and that story had an impact on you, right?
Absolutely.
And maybe it changes the way you see the next person you meet who maybe has a criminal record or...
Well, the guy that's been in prison for 37 years, he sees a guy on the street, a homeless guy, and he says, I don't want to have anything to do with him, and then he goes, well, wait a minute, Yeah.
So this kind of sharing that you've been doing about how somebody's story has impacted you is what I want to foster between all of y'all, that you would sit and listen to each other's stories and get to know one another more. I think it would strengthen our community. I think it would deepen our sense of compassion toward one another. It might make you make a meal for somebody that you wouldn't have known was hurting before, right? Okay. So, I'm gonna go through this quick, because again, I haven't been granted this grant, so these might change very much. My proposed itinerary would be split between summer of 25 and 26, because you have to take at least 12 weeks. But guess who doesn't get a 12-week sabbatical in my family? My husband, right? So if I split it between 2 years, then he can have a couple weeks with me 1 year and a couple weeks with me the other year, instead of he gets 2 weeks with me and I'm doing 10 weeks by myself. So I would begin with a personal retreat at Iona. Have any of you ever heard of Iona? We sing some of their music sometimes. This is the cradle of Celtic Christianity. It's on an island on the western coast of Scotland. You have to like take a train and then a ferry and then a bus and then another ferry to get there. It's pretty remote. But it's been there for like over 1,000 years. And they let people come and stay with them. And then I'd want to spend time in Glasgow and Edinburgh, because that's where the National Archives and the National Library are. They're not in the same city. They're spread apart. And I'd get my sister and brother to come with me, because my sister knows how to dig through an archive at a library, because she did that for her sabbatical. And my brother is the best travel companion ever. So I'd get to spend some time with them. And I never get to spend time with just them. Then I discovered through Ancestry.com that a lot of my people are from Dumfries, which is on the western coast of Scotland, but way south, like by the English border, not way up in the islands. They're called the Hebrides, Hebrides. Because there are villages and graveyards there where we could go and see these people that we're actually connected to, right? And then the next summer, summer 26, would be in Germany, because that's where Jay's family is from. And they were living near like Wittenberg during the Reformation, right? So we could, something like 11 generations of his family was in one place before and after the Reformation. And they've been Lutherans ever since the Reformation. And some of them came to St. Louis, and their trunk, like the wooden trunk that they brought all their things in, was the first altar when what became the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church was formed in St. Louis. So he has like cool Lutheran heritage. And this is about the time when my kids are confirmed or about to be confirmed, so I'm hoping that taking them on this trip is like gonna count for a lot of points for so it would be 8 weeks in 25 and then 4 in 26. But here is what I've written into the grant with a lot of help from lovely people here like Gloria and Diane and Marion Heinz and Leah and other people. Carl Johnson as well. These are the things that I've proposed that would be for you to kind of get this movement of storytelling going. So Carl might even remember, we wrote in a bunch of money for like $20 gift cards. So over the summer, when I'm gone, you can get one and take somebody out to coffee and hear their story, right? Little incentive for you to go. Also, and this is coming along with some of our survey and listening sessions, people are interested in small groups and getting to know one another on a smaller scale. So if you formed a small group and met with them, we wrote into the grant something like, do you remember how much?
On the small group?
Yeah.
I'm thinking it was $6,000.
$6,000.
For the dinners.
For dinners. So depending on how many small groups we have, you'd get like $500
Something, yes.
to go out to a really nice dinner with your small group and tell stories. And not have to be at somebody's house where you're cooking and cleaning, but where you just get to be together. There's an organization in Milwaukee called Exfabula, which we could get to come in and do workshops about how to tell your story. And they could do them here or maybe on a Saturday morning if they needed more time, and could come back several times, kind of training you how to tell the important stories of your life. Another thing that was written into the grant was experiences for the kids who go on mission trips, so that maybe if they're in New Orleans, they can go to one of the museums there and we pay their entry fee to learn more about New Orleans and what happens there. Or that we could organize someone from that community to tell them their story about what it's like to live in New Orleans. Also written into the grant was money for cake. Because, what, pie? You prefer pie. Okay, how about cake and pie? And the grant suggested, like, you're supposed to kind of like send your pastor off and then welcome them back. And because I'm going over 2 summers,
Lots of cake.
it was like send out, come back, to the point where we'd added up something like $500. And my husband was helping me edit my proposal, and he was like, "You cannot ask for $500 for cake. That is inappropriate. They are not going to do that." So, but it is written into the grant. Also written into the grant is coverage for me, right? Like, so the number of times that I would preach, there's money there to pay a guest preacher to come in. And I'm going to be needing to rely on those of you who deliver home communion or Stephen ministers to help me with visits, because it's kind of hard to hire an outsider to do that, right? Okay. Oh, hey, that's it. Cake. Do you have any questions?
You do need help moving your luggage?
From place to place for all 12 weeks?
Sure, I can do that.
Yes, I do.
Should be gone 2 summers.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm relieved,
8 weeks.
because I thought, when I think of a sabbatical, I was thinking you'd be gone a year.
Yeah.
So I'm happy that it's only 12 weeks.
You're happy that it's 12 weeks, and it's over the summer, right, which was kind of a slow time around here. But then I'm not making my kids miss weeks and weeks of school. And there are some people who get a year-long sabbatical. That's kind of more in the academic world. I think my sister's only gotten like a semester's worth of a sabbatical. Beth?
How are you gonna deal with your kids? You're taking them along?
Yeah.
And then are they gonna help you with research and stuff?
Well, the like intense research part will be with my sister. And then Jay would come over with the kids a couple weeks in, because they are not going to have patience for that at all. And one of my dreams is in Dumfries, where my family is from, is to get like an Airbnb that's big enough so that anybody in my family who wanted to come and have a free place to stay could come and join us. Because or Beth, you too. Because like the grant will pay for me and Jay and my kids, but probably not, you know, my cousins. So, but I'd like to get a place that's big enough that it's almost like a family reunion, but in a place where my family's from.
It'll be 8 weeks this summer and 4 weeks next year.
Not this summer.
Oh, no.
Next summer. So you have to wait like 6 months to find out if you got the grant, and then you have to wait even longer to actually use it.
So not
Next
this year,
summer
but
for 8 weeks, and then summer 26 for 4 weeks.
okay.
Yeah.
We'll miss you.
Oh, I'll miss you. I will. Ed.
Do you have to make a commitment to stay at St. Matthew's for another 4 years?
I signed a piece of paper that Pastor Kevin signed as well, and Carl signed, and it says at least a year after you come back, you are committed to being back at St. Matthew's.
So
Yes.
at this point, that is another 4 year.
If we start now, it is another 4 years. Yes. Yeah.
What if you don't get the grant?
What if I don't? I know. I've been like up at night thinking about that. And the sabbatical policy through St. Matthew's doesn't say if you get a grant from the Lilly Foundation, you can go on sabbatical, right? Like it just says after 7 years, you can go on sabbatical. So I think, I mean, I know I would still do something, but it probably wouldn't look like this because somebody else is paying for this.
Yes, right.
And if it was me paying for it, it would look a lot different. I was kind of like, ooh, I'll go to Iona and I'll go here and there, and without a lot of regard for the money. So it would have to look different. Yeah. So I've got my fingers crossed like this. Yes, Don.
You said you're from Dumfries. Any member of your family have that name?
No.
Oh, okay, so then they aren't royalty.
Oh. Okay. Well, it is my hope that I will trace back my ancestry far enough to figure out that I'm actually a Scottish princess. Definitely a goal. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah,
I was
Judy.
going to suggest a backup plan.
A backup plan.
A backup plan, yeah. If you don't get the grant, then you could develop within the church here a fund that those of us who were interested could contribute.
I agree. I was
Okay.
thinking
Yeah.
of the same way.
A backup plan. Yeah. That would be good, because otherwise I think I'll just be devastated. But if I had a backup plan, that would be nice too. Yeah.
We'll all pray you get it.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes, please pray. Please pray. Anybody else? Thanks so much for just being interested and listening. And I really am so excited about what this could mean for all of you and how you could get to know one another, and how we could care for one another in different ways. It just kind of makes me so happy to think that you would all know each other in that way. So if you see opportunities that are connected to story or getting to know one another or small groups coming up in the near future at St. Matthew's, it's probably connected to this. And would just be a good idea to be a part of. So if you start to see those kind of things, really think about taking advantage of those opportunities.
But could there be some kind of an indication when those things are offered that they are related to your grant?
Sure.
I think that would be helpful, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on around here that maybe you might not participate in,
Okay,
but
Yeah.
if it has a direction to it.
yeah.
most
I'll say,
people might
this
be
is the
interested.
small group that if you're a part of it, you get to go
Yes.
to a really fancy dinner. Yeah, Carl?
I think this is such a beautiful way we as a congregation can bless you and your family.
Oh, yeah.
And you will bless us when you come back too. It's so beautifully useful. Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
And that's kind of the idea of the grant, right? Like they didn't want it to have the pressure of like, you have to go on sabbatical and come back with a manuscript for a book, right? How restful is that? So they don't do that, but they do want it to be connected to your community of faith. And thinking about that was really exciting. It really was. Yeah. Okay, I gotta do church. Thanks for coming, guys.